one time with a man who believed that his wife's submission meant she could not go from one room to the other in the house without his permission. That's the kind of pathology that makes it very easy for people to read a text like this and just throw it away. However, we don't do that. We don't throw babies out with dirty bathwater in this church. We love babies, beautiful babies. We nurture babies so that they will grow up into what they ought to be. So let that bathwater go and hug this baby because it is beautiful. And that's what I would like to try to explain now. The truth of headship and the truth of submission are in the Bible, and they're not only here, they're beautiful. One way to think about them from last 2 Sundays is that they are one way of wearing the mark of majesty as a wife. Husband has a way of wearing his. She has a way of wearing hers. That's what the text is about. We do not cancel out headship and submission lest we cancel out Christ and the church. So here's the question. First, what is it not? 6 things it's not. And second, what is it? Submission. Number 1, what it's not. I'm getting all these out of verses 1 to 6. Submission does not mean agreeing with everything your husband says. And you can see that in verse 1 clearly. She's a Christian and he's not. He has one set of ideas about the ultimate meaning of the universe. She has another set of ideas about the ultimate meaning of reality. Peter calls her to be submissive, assuming she will not submit to his unbelief by joining him in unbelief. In other words, at the most important level, she won't submit to his idea. I'm not joining you in unbelief. Kill me. And that's not a contradiction of biblical submission, Peter says. Number 2, submission does not mean leaving your brain and your will at the wedding altar. It's not the inability or the unwillingness to think for yourself. Here is a woman who heard the gospel. She thought about the gospel. She assessed the truth claims of the gospel. She apprehended the spiritual beauty of Christ. And she made a choice. I submit to Jesus. I'm a Christian. I believe. Her husband also heard the gospel. And the reason I believe that is because of the little phrase, he's disobedient to the word. That he chose that phrase to describe his unbelief means he's heard the word. And that she can win him without a word is because he's heard the word. And he thought about it. And he decided, that's not for me. Her thinking was not governed by his thinking on this issue. And it's not a contradiction to biblical submission. It's not leaving your brain and your will, your decision-making power at the wedding altar. Number 3, submission does not mean avoiding every effort to change a husband. Submission does not mean avoiding every effort to change a husband. The whole point of this text is how to change a husband. Isn't it? You can win him, which means change the most important thing about him. Be subject to your own husbands so that, this is verse 1, even if some do not obey the word, they may be gained or won without a word by the conduct of their wives. So if you care If you don't care about the Bible, you might say submission has to mean taking the husband the way he is with no effort to change him. If you don't care about the Bible, you might say submission has to mean that. That's what the word means. Take him as he is, no effort to change. But if you believe what the Bible says, you conclude, paradoxically, this text calls for submission as a means of changing him. Number 4, submission does not mean putting the will of the husband before the will of Christ. Now, the text clearly teaches the wife is a follower of Jesus before and above being a follower of her husband. Submission to Jesus relativizes all other submissions. Submission to government is relativized. Submission to employers is relativized. Submission to parents is relativized. Submission to husband is relativized, meaning Christ is supreme. When I submit to Him, that may bring me into conflict with submissions down here. And this one is absolute. These are not. These are relative to that one. Christ I always submit to. These 4 spheres of life I usually submit to, but may not if they conflict with my King. When it says that Sarah, in verse 6, called Abraham Lord, it's very interesting. Wish we had time to go into this. It's Lord with a little L, as in the phrase, my Lord. It's a throwaway phrase. You go back and read it. Just look in your little margin. You go back and read it in Genesis 22. It's a throwaway phrase. There's no big theological thing hanging on it at all. Peter picks out a most insignificant little throwaway phrase, my Lord. But when Sarah is described in Hebrews 11 as a woman of faith, it's because she is obeying Lord with a capital L. And there is no question where Abraham fits into her scheme, and there should be no question for any Christian woman where her husband fits in like 10,000 miles below Jesus. And it's for Jesus' sake that she submits to Him. That's number 4. Number 5. Submission does not mean that a wife gets her personal spiritual strength primarily through her husband. Submission does not mean that a wife gets her personal spiritual strength primarily through her husband. Now, don't mistake. I believe I am called, and it is my vocation to strengthen my wife and to be strong for her. She should draw down strength from me every day. I should stand for her, pray for her, live for her, be there for her. She should feel safe and helped by my existence, not depleted by my whining. However, there's going to be a day when John Piper's not going to be there. Probably. We both think I'm dying first. In that day, her primary source of strength will not have been lost. Agreed? In this text, that is clear because this woman is being told, find your hope in God, find your fearlessness in that hope, find your personhood in that fearlessness, in that hope, and out of that strength, win this man. That's just the opposite of leaning on him. She hopes for the day when she can lean on him. Number 6.